While preparing for our anniversary getaway, I stumbled upon a disposable phone tucked away in my partner's drawer. The last message on it didn't raise any immediate alarms, but it mentioned that life insurance payouts would triple for accidents occurring during the trip. I boarded the flight as planned but made a last-minute decision to switch seats. It turned out to be a fateful choice when the cabin filled with carbon monoxide, and the oxygen mask in my original seat failed to deploy. The flight attendant's face went pale when she spotted me emerging from the restroom. I never imagined I would find myself in a situation like this, and even now, as I type this from a hotel room in a city I never intended to visit, I'm grappling with the reality of how my life with someone I've known for 15 years could lead to this moment. I need to share my story, hoping that putting it into words will help me understand how our anniversary trip morphed into a nightmare, just not the one my partner had envisioned. To give you some context, I'm 39 years old and have been married to Sarah, who is 37, for over a decade. We met during my junior year of college when she transferred into my sociology class. I can still picture the first time I laid eyes on her, self-assured, intelligent, and with a laugh that could light up the room. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot in an intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Her parents took to me right away, and my mother often referred to her as the daughter she never had. The early years of our marriage were wonderful. We both worked diligently, purchased a home in the suburbs, and built what I believed was a comfortable life together. We had mutually agreed not to have children, choosing instead to focus on our careers. I work in finance, not the glamorous Wall Street type, but a stable position managing investments for a mid-sized firm. The hours can be long, but the pay is decent, and I've always been able to provide a comfortable lifestyle for us. Sarah, on the other hand, is in pharmaceutical sales, which requires her to travel frequently for meetings with doctors and hospital administrators across the country. At least, that's what I thought she was doing during all those trips. In hindsight, there were numerous signs I either overlooked or chose to ignore. The late-night phone calls she would take in another room, the weekends spent catching up on reports, and her defensiveness whenever I inquired about her schedule. The past few years had felt different. The easy conversations we once shared over dinner had been replaced by silence or superficial small talk. Physical intimacy had become infrequent and almost mechanical when it did occur. Whenever I tried to discuss it, Sarah would attribute it to work stress or fatigue from her travels. I chalked it up to the mid-marriage slump that everyone talks about, convincing myself that every relationship goes through phases. I suggested counseling once, but Sarah dismissed the idea, insisting we were fine and just busy with work. So, I did what I always did. I tried harder, backed off when she seemed irritated, and told myself things would eventually improve. In an effort to rekindle our connection, I planned an anniversary trip to the Maldives. It was expensive, yes, but I had been saving for years for something special. I spent months researching the perfect overwater bungalow and planning excursions I knew she would love. When I surprised her with the tickets 2 months ago, Sarah appeared genuinely excited for the first time in ages. She was attentive, even affectionate, asking about our itinerary and making suggestions for activities. She even initiated intimacy for the first time in months. I thought we were finally turning a corner. 3 days before our departure, while packing at home, I remembered that Sarah had stored our snorkeling gear in her dresser. As I rummaged through her drawer, my hand brushed against something hard beneath some folded sweaters, a cheap flip phone, the kind you can buy for cash at any convenience store. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something deep inside me sensed that this wasn't right. Sarah already had a personal phone and a work phone. Why would she need a third hidden device? I turned it on, no password protection, and opened the messages. My heart sank as I scrolled through a single conversation with an unsaved number. The messages chilled me to the bone. They discussed an upgraded insurance policy, mentioning that I had to express concern about international travel. The payout? $2 million, triple the amount for accidental death during air travel. The sender assured the recipient that I still didn't suspect anything. The messages detailed their relationship, spanning several months, and included plans for after I was out of the picture, even jokes about how naive I had been. The last message was sent just 2 hours ago. Soon we'll never have to hide again. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still in my trembling hand, trying to catch my breath. I showed the messages to the manager, a woman named Diane, who immediately contacted the security team and airport police. "This is highly unusual," Diane said after a flurry of phone calls, "but we're going to have air marshals on your flight and have alerted the cabin crew. You should proceed as normal, but we recommend switching seats after boarding without telling your partner." "What about the other passengers?" I asked, suddenly realizing I might be putting others at risk without knowing exactly what was planned. "It's safer to proceed with caution and have security in place than to confront her now and potentially lose the chance to catch everyone involved," a security officer explained. "We'll be watching everything closely." We had first-class tickets in a small cabin with just 8 seats total. Our assigned seats were 2A and 2B by the window. When I arrived at the gate, Vanessa was already there, looking slightly anxious but smiling brightly when she saw me. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I can't wait to have you all to myself." Those words, which once would have filled me with joy, now turned my stomach. We boarded together, stowed our carry-ons, and settled in. I made a show of taking a sleeping pill, actually just a vitamin, and told Vanessa I planned to sleep through most of the flight. About 20 minutes after takeoff, once the drink service had started and I pretended to grow drowsy, I excused myself to use the lavatory. Instead of returning to my seat, I quietly spoke to a flight attendant named Charlotte, explaining that I wasn't feeling well and asking if I could move to an empty seat at the back of the first-class cabin to lie down. She nodded, understanding, as she had been briefed by the airline manager, and discreetly led me to seat 4F on the opposite side. From there, I could keep an eye on Vanessa, who appeared to be texting someone despite the airplane mode announcement. She glanced at my empty seat several times, looking increasingly agitated as the minutes passed. After about 20 minutes, she got up and approached Charlotte, asking where I was. Charlotte calmly explained that I wasn't feeling well and had moved to rest more comfortably. Vanessa's expression flickered between concern and something darker before she composed herself and returned to her seat. I noticed her typing furiously on her phone. Approximately 2 hours into the flight, while most passengers were either sleeping or watching movies, a thin haze began filling the cabin. At first, I thought it was just condensation from the air conditioning, but then I noticed a strange odor, slightly sweet but with a metallic undertone. Carbon monoxide is odorless in pure form, but whatever delivery mechanism was being used must have contained other chemicals. The effects were almost immediate. Passengers began coughing, some complaining of headaches or dizziness. The man across from Vanessa slumped in his seat, and oxygen masks deployed from the ceiling except for the one above seat 2A, my original seat, which stubbornly remained retracted in its compartment. I watched in disbelief as Vanessa calmly pulled her own mask down and secured it, then glanced at my empty seat with what looked like satisfaction, all while other passengers were panicking around her. There was no concern, no alarm, just the satisfied look of someone watching a plan unfold. The flight attendants rushed to distribute portable oxygen bottles, and the pilot announced we would be making an emergency landing. I had been holding my breath as much as possible and quickly grabbed an oxygen bottle from a passing flight attendant. 2 air marshals moved quickly to secure the cabin, checking on passengers who seemed most affected. That's when Charlotte, the attendant who had helped me change seats, saw me emerging from the back row, very much alive and not unconscious in seat 2A. The look on her face was pure shock, as if she'd seen a ghost. She rushed over, helped me secure the portable oxygen properly, and whispered, "Sir, you need to stay away from your wife. Security is handling this." The plane made an emergency landing in Frankfurt, Germany, even though our flight had been headed to Dubai as a connection to the Maldives. Emergency services were waiting on the tarmac as passengers were evacuated. The air marshals quietly took Vanessa into custody. She kept looking around wildly, clearly confused about how her plan had failed, until she spotted me being escorted out by a different exit. The look of shock on her face is something I'll never forget. It wasn't just surprise, it was fury, as if I had somehow cheated her out of something that was rightfully hers. "This is a mistake," she kept saying as they led her away. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Tell them, honey. Tell them this is crazy." German police detained both of us for questioning, me as a witness, her as a suspect. It didn't take them long to find the small device hidden in the overhead compartment. Once they had gathered all the evidence they needed from me, I was free to go home. The international cooperation between law enforcement agencies was impressive. The FBI had agents working the case from both sides of the Atlantic. Walking into our house, my house now, I guess, was surreal. Everything looked exactly as we had left it for our anniversary trip, her coffee mug still in the sink, her slippers by the couch, and mail piled on the counter. But the person who owned those things, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. In her place was a stranger who had meticulously planned my death. The first night was the hardest. I couldn't sleep in our bed, I couldn't even go into the bedroom. I ended up curled up on the couch with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan the house made. It felt contaminated somehow, as if her betrayal had seeped into the walls. The legal process has been moving surprisingly quickly. The evidence was overwhelming: the text messages, the tampered oxygen mask which had been deliberately disabled during routine maintenance by someone who bribed a ground crew member, the carbon monoxide device, which turned out to be a modified air freshener that Ryan had built, given his engineering background. And then there was the money trail. This is where things got even more twisted. When investigators dug into our finances, they discovered that Vanessa had taken out not one, but 3 life insurance policies on me in the past year. There was the one I knew about, our mutual policy through my employer, and 2 more with different companies, all with massive payouts for accidental death. She had been forging my signature on documents for months. But here's the real kicker: they also found evidence that Ryan and Vanessa had done this before. Ryan was previously married, and his wife died 3 years ago in what was ruled an accidental drowning during a vacation in Mexico. He collected $500,000 in life insurance. They've reopened that investigation now, with Mexican authorities exhuming the body to check for evidence of foul play. The detective handling my case believes they met shortly after her death, not the coincidence at the gym that Vanessa had always claimed. Vanessa and Ryan are both facing multiple charges: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. Now they're looking at the previous case too. They're being held without bail. Ryan apparently tried to cut a deal by throwing Vanessa under the bus, claiming it was all her idea. She did the same, blaming him for everything. Their loyalty to each other didn't last long when facing life in prison. I've had to give multiple statements to the FBI, testify before a grand jury, and meet endlessly with prosecutors. The worst part was sitting across from Vanessa's parents, who have been devastated by all this. They've known me for 15 years and considered me a son. Her father, a retired judge, kept apologizing as if he were somehow responsible for his daughter's actions. Her mother couldn't even look at me, her grief and shame were too overwhelming. They've known me for 15 years and considered me a son, and now they're trying to reconcile the daughter they raised with someone capable of such calculated evil. I don't envy them that journey. The divorce was finalized last month, expedited due to the criminal charges. I didn't want anything from her, just a clean break. The house is on the market. I can't stand being there anymore. Every room holds memories now tainted by betrayal. I'm staying in a small apartment downtown until I figure out my next move. Some of you have asked about my job and how they've handled all this. My company has been surprisingly supportive. They gave me paid leave for as long as I needed, and my boss personally helped me sort through the insurance fraud mess. I've been back at work for about a month now, though concentrating is still difficult. Some days, people try to act normal around me, but I catch them staring sometimes, whispering when they think I can't hear. I guess I can't blame them. It's not every day your coworker's spouse tries to murder him on an international flight. I've been seeing a therapist twice a week, trying to process everything. She says I'm experiencing a form of PTSD, which makes sense. I still have nightmares about that flight, about what would have happened if I hadn't found that phone. I wake up gasping for breath, convinced I'm suffocating from carbon monoxide. I'm working through trust issues that run deeper than the Mariana Trench. Dating again seems like an impossible concept right now, though friends keep suggesting it would be good for me. The thought of letting someone close enough to hurt me again is terrifying. My therapist has helped me see that what happened wasn't my fault. For months, I've been going over every moment of our marriage, looking for signs I should have noticed, ways I could have prevented this. It was simply about money in her relationship with Ryan, but there must be something deeper, a fundamental brokenness that allows someone to plan their spouse's murder so coldly. Whatever her reasons, I'm working on accepting that this wasn't about me or anything I did or didn't do. Some betrayals defy understanding. The preliminary hearing is next month, and the trial is expected to start early next year. I'll be the star witness, of course. I'm not looking forward to facing her in court or having to relive every detail of that day, but I'll do it not just for justice, but for closure. I know this update hasn't been as dramatic as some might have hoped, no epic revenge, no satisfying confrontation scene, just the slow, messy process of rebuilding a life shattered by betrayal. But in a way, my survival is the greatest revenge. Every day, Vanessa sits in her cell, knowing that her perfect plan failed, while I'm out here living, and she faces a lifetime of imprisonment. That's justice enough for me. I'll update again after the trial if there's interest. For now, I'm focusing on healing and rediscovering who I am outside of the marriage that nearly killed me. Thanks for listening. Final update, 18 months later. It's been a while since my last update, and so much has changed that I hardly know where to begin. First, for those asking about the trial, there wasn't one. 2 months before the court date, both Vanessa and Ryan accepted plea deals. The evidence was simply too overwhelming, and their lawyers advised them that going to trial would likely result in even harsher sentences. Vanessa pled guilty to attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. She received 25 years with the possibility of parole after 18. Ryan got 30 years because of the additional charges related to his first wife's accidental drowning, which investigators ultimately proved was murder. They found evidence he had tampered with her scuba equipment during that fateful vacation in Mexico. The medical examiner found traces of a sedative in the exhumed remains that would have made her too disoriented to recognize her equipment was malfunctioning. I attended the sentencing hearing. My therapist thought it would provide closure, and she was right. Seeing Vanessa in her prison jumpsuit, hair pulled back, no makeup, no pretense, it was like looking at a stranger. The composed, confident woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone small and defeated. When given the chance to speak, she actually apologized, though it rang hollow. She said she got lost somewhere along the way and never meant for things to go this far. The judge wasn't moved, calling the plot cold-blooded and meticulously planned. Ryan, on the other hand, showed no remorse. He stared straight ahead during the whole proceeding, refusing to even acknowledge my presence. The judge noted his apparent lack of conscience as a factor in his sentencing. A psychiatrist who evaluated him used terms like sociopathic tendencies and predatory behavior patterns. Apparently, he had been investigated for suspicious deaths of previous clients when he worked as a personal trainer years ago, though nothing was ever proven. After the hearing, Vanessa's mother approached me in the hallway. We hadn't spoken since this nightmare began. She looked aged beyond her years, grief etched into every line of her face. She hugged me and whispered, "I'm so sorry we raised a monster." That moment broke something in both of us, and we stood there crying in the courthouse corridor. We've kept in touch sporadically since then, both of us trying to make sense of a senseless situation. Her father passed away 6 months ago from a heart attack, though the doctor said stress was a contributing factor, another life destroyed by Vanessa's actions. As for my personal life, I did end up taking the transfer to Seattle. It was the best decision I could have made. The constant rain suits my mood some days, but the mountains and the sea have become my therapy. I bought a small house near a national park, nothing fancy, just a place that's entirely mine with no memories attached. I've painted every room, replaced all the furniture, and planted a garden that's just starting to flourish. Creating something new has been healing in ways I didn't expect. Work has been a healthy distraction. I threw myself into it, perhaps too intensely at first. My therapist gently suggested I was using 70-hour weeks to avoid processing my feelings. She was right, of course. I've since found a better balance. My colleagues here don't know the full story unless they Google me, and most are respectful enough not to bring it up. I'm just the new transfer from the East Coast office, not that guy whose wife tried to kill him. Dating again has been a journey. My first attempt was an unmitigated disaster. I had a panic attack when my date excused herself to the bathroom, and I immediately imagined she was texting an accomplice.